Forgotten yet famous. Empty but iconic. 5 abandoned sites deep-rooted in our popular culture. An overgrown ruin in India, immortalized by world-renowned musicians.
What do the lads from Liverpool have to do with all this?
A shattered compound in Colombia, linked to a criminal mastermind.
When you're the 7th richest man in the world, you gotta watch your back at all times.
The launch pad for a sporting superstar in Germany.
You can actually see the long jump pit where one of the greatest American athletes of all time trained.
Disintegrating remains in Poland, where real-life heroes inspired Hollywood.
Looking around, it's very redolent of that movie, and this is actually the site that it was based on.
And mythical strongholds in Romania, home to a legendary villain.
All sorts of tall tales swirl around about these sites. He was far more bloodthirsty and brutal than his fictional counterpart.
These 5 derelict locations set the stage for moments that captured the world's imagination. Decaying relics. Ruins of lost worlds. Sites haunted by the past. Their secrets waiting to be revealed. At the foot of the Himalayas in northern India, a far-out site once attracted some of the world's most famous faces.
It could have been a resort, but you can kind of tell that even when it was new, it was pretty rough around the edges.
The deeper you go, the stranger things become.
Wherever you walk through the trees, another unique structure pops up in front of you. It's like some kind of magical land. You're not quite sure what to expect next.
Sprouting from the forest floor is a collection of small, round houses.
There are these dome-like structures. It's quite a jumble, and some of them even look like caves.
There are a lot of these small spaces, and there's not much there to give you clues as to what these were used for.
Inside, there's Hindi writing on the walls.
One clue is all this kind of spiritual graffiti.
This is not the normal world. It's like you're entering into a whole different dimension. There's a very relaxing feeling to the whole site. It's a calm place to be. But what was it for?
So how did this decaying site in an Indian forest come to play a vital role in Western culture? Below this clifftop ruin is one of the world's most sacred rivers, the Ganges. Raju Gosai knows this compound well.
This is a very spiritual place with nice, beautiful setting and all. This is the place where pilgrims from far and near come and they take holy bath in the Ganges.
These structures sit high above the throng of the legendary Indian city of Rishikesh.
Rishikesh is a place of considerable religious significance. Pilgrims have been coming here for centuries. And this site is different. People coming here were coming here for a very particular purpose.
If you want to understand what this place was really all about, it's those small, domed, cave-like structures that are the real clues.
More than 100 domes hide in this forest, each one built from thousands of stones.
All the material for building these domes and other structure were collected from River Ganga. All those stone used was collected from the riverbank.
These crumbling structures were once the height of spiritual luxury.
This place was created by famous Indian spiritual guru Maharishi in 1961.
The Maharishi was known for developing his particular brand of transcendental meditation. And in 1955, he introduced that transcendental meditation to India and the rest of the world. The Maharishi created this place with Western habits in mind.
This is the Churasi Kutia Ashram.
An ashram is a center of religious study. The Maharishi's ashram was a place that people came to study and to meditate, to hear lectures from him, to get away from the pressures of daily life and the world.
It's quiet, it's calming, it's private. This is a place to meditate, to find peace, to make inner explorations.
He created all the modern facilities that was required for his student to learn, his disciple to learn transcendental meditation. This is a cluster of domes, you can say. It only lacked a proper shower. And Maharishi used to motivate people to go and take bath in the Ganges.
When these meditation domes were built in 1970, they were unrivaled in India. But thanks to one of the biggest pop bands in history, this now forgotten ashram became the most sought-after place on earth.
You round the corner and suddenly there's a massive image of the Beatles. What do the lads from Liverpool have to do with all this?
In 1968, the Beatles came here and it was a worldwide media hype.
Also along for the ride was Mike Love from the Beach Boys, the singer Donovan, the actress Mia Farrow and her sister Prudence, and all sorts of other people. This big entourage all showed up here.
George Harrison was really dedicated to transcendental meditation and threw himself into it. And he said at one point, we have all the money you could dream of, we have all the fame you could wish for, but it isn't peace, is it?
When the Beatles came here, there were hardly any infrastructure here.
The owner, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, made sure his esteemed guests got what they needed.
You know, the Maharishi was no dummy, and he recognized that when the Beatles showed up, this was the best thing that ever happened to his movement.
We are at the Beatles bungalow. These are some of the rooms where the Beatles used to stay.
The bungalows allotted to the Beatles were more spacious and better equipped than those assigned to the other students.
So this place was known as Rishikesh Hilton because it had wall-to-wall carpet, it had curtains, it had bunk beds with mattresses. They had an attached toilet here with bathtubs. And this is the room where John Lennon and Cynthia Lennon used to stay. John Lennon and Cynthia Lennon came here together and they used to stay here in one room. But after a few days, John and Cynthia separated and they used to live in different rooms.
The compound also had a post office. John was often leaving his wife, Cynthia, who was there with him, to go down to the post office and see if there'd been any new telegrams from Yoko Ono, who he was beginning to become involved with.
Although there had been tensions in the band, this site fueled their creativity.
We are on the roof of the Beatles bungalow where the Beatles used to come and play music here. The White Album, many of the songs which they composed here.
Between hanging out with the Maharishi and meditating, they wrote roughly 40 songs in just 7 weeks.
Back in the USSR and I'm So Tired were composed here, the latter apparently by Lenin after he was suffering from weeks of poor sleep at the ashram.
This is the room where Prudence Farrow used to stay and which inspired the Beatles to compose their one of the most memorable songs, Dear Prudence.
Mia Farrow's sister, Prudence, spent so much time in her room meditating that people started to worry about her.
So this period in the ashram is linked to one of the most creative times for the Beatles.
After the Fab Four returned to Britain, the ashram continued to flourish thanks to the attention it had gained. New meditation pods were built to accommodate the tourists who flocked here. The whole enterprise was resting on shaky foundations.
Maharishi Mahesh Yogi took this land from the Forest Department in 1961. That lease expired in 1981. And after that, the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi Foundation made several attempts for the renewal of the lease. But the process never got completed.
The former ashram fell into disrepair as a result of vandalism and the encroachment of the jungle.
Today, this atmospheric site is controlled by the Rajaji Tiger Reserve. But it will always be synonymous with four lads from Liverpool.
Intellectually, this site, these bungalows, these strange halls, had a serious influence on who the Beatles became as a band afterwards.
In Germany, west of Berlin, a unique complex is linked to a seminal moment in sporting history.
Few Germans realize that the site even exists. It's almost as if it's been forgotten on purpose.
A silent swimming pool awaits guests. A lone pommel horse sits in an empty gymnasium. And meadows stretch out in front of carefully positioned huts. Jan Besevich is an expert on the history of this place.
This site really mirrors much of our past. We have the beauty of youth on one side, and we have the tragedy of death on the other.
This complex dates back to 1934, just 1 year after Adolf Hitler had become Chancellor of Germany. He understood the power of propaganda and planned to use it at the forthcoming Berlin Olympic Games.
Now in 1936, he has an opportunity to show to the world a new and rebuilt, completely new kind of Germany.
This is the Olympic Village for the 1936 Berlin Games. Built to impress the 4,000 athletes who would be flocking in from all over the globe.
People met here to celebrate their youth, their physical strength. These were the most elite sportsmen of their time.
Among them was the American Jesse Owens.
You can actually see the long jump pit where Jesse Owens, one of the greatest American athletes of all time, trained.
This site had everything the foreign athletes needed to ensure they sent favorable reports back home.
Here we can clearly see how the Germans improved by building an Olympic village which nobody had seen so far. It's not just having little houses for accommodation, it's having real houses with a terrace for sunbathing, with a central heating system inside, and all the luxury of that period. And all the people who were here in 1936 were really impressed by it.
The athletes could also watch their colleagues performing live on the big screen.
This little room saw a major breakthrough in technology because here on this wall was a TV set, and was for the first time in sports history that you had a live broadcast. These games were really also the first media games, the first real propaganda games, so incorporating everything they had.
But outside of the luxurious Olympic Village, the racial purification of Germany continued at pace.
While the Germans allowed Jews to participate in the games, they were, behind the scenes, continuing to pass anti-Semitic laws.
Meanwhile, in the Olympic Stadium, an African-American athlete was about to make history. Here, Jesse Owens took the first of 4 gold medals from Hitler's Aryan athletes, humiliating the Führer. Once the Olympics were over, the village was handed to the German army. After the war, it fell under Soviet control until the USSR collapsed and this site was left to disintegrate. Now, the village is being repurposed into modern apartments. But the events of the 1936 Olympic Games leave an enduring legacy.
There are important lessons offered by a place like this. One is that we can have peaceful competition between nations, even the nations that are about to engage in terrible war. But possibly the most important lesson is you shouldn't be betting on demonstrating white supremacy when Jesse Owens is in the same room.
In Romania, the mystical Carpathian Mountains sit cloaked in legend.
You've got these incredible valleys with the rivers running along the bottom. It is stunning, absolutely stunning.
Atop one forested peak is a blood-soaked cluster of ruins.
This is a proper fortress. It looks impregnable, but there's an incredible amount of damage as well.
It certainly looks like it had a dramatic downfall in the end.
Local folklore tells of a shadowy link to another medieval castle nearby.
It has turrets, it has battlements, it's every single fairy tale that you've ever heard.
Every fairy tale has its villain, and this one's no exception.
All sorts of tall tales, legends, and rumors swirl around about these sites. Some are old and some are new. But what do we know for sure?
The man who links these two castles is known the world over.
I am Dracula.
Dracula is one of the most famous villains of all time. It's a story that's been told over and over again in various interpretations of what vampires are like.
This is Castel Bran, otherwise known as the fabled Dracula's Castle. Matei Petrisor has spent the past 8 years establishing what links this site and the legendary count to the mysterious ruined fortress in the mountains.
So we are now in Transylvania, the land of legend and mystery. a place that will give you a perfect feeling for the legend of Dracula hiding here in this castle in Transylvania.
In this part of the world, fear of vampires is a very common thing.
Transylvanians have been known to practice a ritual that stops the dead from returning.
We go at the graveyard, we dig into the tomb, and then after that, in order to make sure that he will never come back again, we have to cut the head with a silver dagger. And then we place the head between the legs to make sure that he will never come and kill people in the village.
The local law fired author Bram Stoker's imagination.
When he describes the castle, it's perfectly just like in the book, up on a cliff, a little river nearby.
It's Gothic, it's got this haunted feeling about it. It's the quintessential Transylvanian castle. But this wasn't the real Dracula's home.
That accolade lies with the rundown hilltop citadel, where a true-life Dracula did exist.
In fact, he was far more bloodthirsty and brutal than his fictional counterpart.
Looking at it, you can see these incredible, strong walls heading up from vertical cliffs, absolutely vertical. And then there's no easy way to get up there. There's no defined road, just inaccessible.
This is Poenari Castle. Historian Nicolae Ionescu has extensively studied the defensive structures, which have stood here for nearly 1,000 years.
The tower behind us is the first part of the castle to be built. It was probably built in the 13th century. They chose this location to build the castle because of the close proximity to the road. In trading routes like this, castles were built to control borders and customs, where local rulers wanted to collect taxes from traders.
In the 15th century, this site earned the blood-soaked reputation that easily outstripped that of the fictional Castle Dracula. Poenari Castle lay in the medieval kingdom of Wallachia, a buffer state between the expanding Ottoman Empire and the Kingdom of Hungary. The castle sat on a flashpoint in the borderlands. And this site was the domain of a Wallachian prince, Vladislav III. He had inherited his father's honorable title, Order of the Dragon.
In Romanian tradition, the word Dracul translates as dragon or devil. So for most Romanians, Dracula means the son of the devil.
Vladislav III became known as Vlad Dracula. But it wasn't just the name that earned the real Count Dracula his notorious place in history. Holed up in this hilltop fortress, Vlad Dracula was known far and wide for his blood-curdling cruelty.
He earned the nickname Vlad the Impaler, or Vlad Tepes in the local tongue.
The stories of brutality litter his reign.
Within these walls, Turks who refused to remove their turbans had them nailed to their heads. The local nobility was invited to a banquet where Vlad impaled them. And rumors of cannibalism were rife.
As you can imagine, though, such wholesale slaughter didn't make Vlad the most popular person at the time.
His brutality was most often focused on the marauding Ottomans.
Gestul cel mai caracteristic pentru el.
His most iconic historical episode was when he seized a part of the Ottoman army that was pursuing him and impaled them.
I-a prins pe toți împreună cu trupele turcești și i-a tras în țeapă.
In some ways, Vlad, the real person, is a more terrifying figure than Count Dracula.
Images circulated at the time exaggerated Vlad's appetite for impaling and human flesh. Wherever the truth lies, Vlad Dracula finally met his match when the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II arrived at the gates.
So 1462, we find Dracula fighting against Mehmed down in Wallachia. The capital was conquered and destroyed. He was running up Poenari, the fortress that he built.
But eventually, Vlad was driven out of Poenari Castle, and he fled here to seek refuge in what would later become known as Dracula's castle.
He hid here, and then the spies of the Hungarian king find out he's trying to run away using the secret passage, and they wait for him. He was arrested at the exit from the tunnel.
It's believed he spent 2 months as a prisoner there, rotting in the dungeons.
After his release, Vlad Dracula swiftly regained his lost territories, but his reign was short-lived.
While marching to yet another battle with the Ottomans, Vlad and a small vanguard of soldiers were ambushed, and Vlad was killed. His head was cut off and sent to the Sultan as a trophy.
The name Dracula may be synonymous with the world's favorite villain, but in his home country of Romania, Vladislav III is a national hero.
Vlad the Impaler was and always will remain in the Romanian conscience as a lover of truth and justice. Even though he used brutal methods, he tried to make the world a better place.
Here, he's admired as a leader who protected his merchants, rid the land of thieves, and stood up to oppressive empires.
His courage to do so. That's what got him to remain in the Romanian national conscience.
În istoria și în conștiința românilor.
Today, while Vlad Dracula's real-life home lies abandoned, tourists flock to the castle of his fictional counterpart.
Many movies were made after this character. So I do believe that this legend will never die.
In Guatapé, Colombia, a battered waterside ruin was once home to an infamous outlaw.
It looks a little bit like a cross between a Playboy mansion and some kind of military fort.
Evidence of violence soon emerges in this sprawling 20-acre site.
There's signs of some kind of enormous explosion. So this place clearly has a story to tell.
William Jimenez once worked at this dilapidated compound.
It took almost 7 years to build the structures that you can see here today.
It had a swimming pool, tennis courts, a football pitch, none of which sound out of the ordinary. But that football pitch doubled up as a helipad. And it also had its own private seaplane dock. This place was anything but ordinary.
It's just 25 miles from the town of Medellin, where the Colombian drug lord Pablo Escobar founded his infamous cartel.
When you're Pablo Escobar, you can never really relax. He was always surrounded by security.
This is Hacienda La Manuela, named after his only daughter. Escobar built this luxury retreat to keep his family safe.
He had armed guards, he had walls that were built like the walls of a fortress. Escobar wanted to be ready for anything.
William remembers the elusive drug baron's visits here.
Pablo himself was here only 2 or 3 times maximum. He'd only spend a few hours here and then leave. He wouldn't even stay the night.
When you're the 7th richest man in the world, you gotta watch your back at all times.
Escobar had become a target not just for Colombian authorities and the US government, but also rival cartels. And in 1993, devastation came to Hacienda La Manuela.
Some of Escobar's rivals managed to infiltrate the compound.
What happened was that 6 small pickups and 1 van came full of people. It was around midnight. They placed 2 bombs, one on that side and one on the other side. This was where they placed the biggest bomb. There was a huge explosion. You can imagine, everything was shaking. In this area, there was a bathroom, and that's where the bomb exploded upward and destroyed the walls around it. It was such a powerful explosion.
This bombing was kind of the beginning of the end for Escobar.
Although Escobar survived the assassination attempt, his luck would soon run out. In December 1993, Colombia's national police finally pinpointed the gangster's whereabouts and shot him dead as he tried to flee across Medellin's rooftops. Today, Escobar's complex legacy means his once glorious mansion lies abandoned. In the woods of western Poland, an unassuming collection of ruins saw a heroic endeavor immortalized by Hollywood.
You see some concrete vestiges of the past, but it seems that the forest has reclaimed whatever was here.
So at some point, years ago, this was cleared. But why did somebody clear a space in this forest?
You actually come across some concrete pillars in the ground. They're clearly the constructs of something that's repeated, something quite large.
Below ground, a series of passages seems to go nowhere. And deeper in the woods, a curious feature emerges.
On a pathway, you see this line of stones with names inscribed on the stones. And then you arrive at the end, and there's a big stone, and it says Harry. Harry, here in the middle of a forest somewhere in Poland. Quite the mystery.
Marek Wazash has scoured these woods to piece together what went on here back in the 1940s.
These are foundations of the theater. Large theater, 350 seats. What you see here is an orchestra pit, stage, backstage, and few rooms behind.
Surrounding it are the remnants of neatly built barrack buildings. This was a military camp, and in the 1940s, this Polish wood was part of Nazi Germany. It was known as Stalag Luft 3.
Stalag is short for Stammlager. This is where they kept prisoners. Luft connotes that it was run by the Luftwaffe. And it housed various prisoners from the Allied air forces.
From 1942, it held more than 10,000 prisoners of war. One of the biggest officers' camps for airmen.
Risky Allied air raids in the early years of the Second World War resulted in many daredevil airmen caught behind enemy lines.
Prisoner of war camps were filled with brilliant, highly motivated officers and sergeants, and these guys were able to make life miserable for the German soldiers.
There was a code of honor among officers that in World War II that if you were captured, you had to try to escape.
And it was clear that the German Luftwaffe knew this.
This place was built in the heartland of the German Reich. Even if you managed to get out of this camp, you weren't going anywhere.
But that wasn't enough to stop the Allied airmen trying to get out. This camp, surrounded by searchlight towers, rows of barbed wire, machine guns, and dogs, meant there was only one way to do that: by tunnel. But the Germans had that covered too.
They build the huts, the barracks, off the ground with a clearance beneath so that it's harder to tunnel down.
Undeterred, a group of Allied officers led by squadron leader Roger Bushell came up with a daring escape plan.
Bushell's idea is that you're going to build 3 big tunnels, nicknamed Tom, Dick, and Harry. You're going to assume that the Germans are going to discover 1 or 2 of them, but with 3, you'll all get out of the 3rd one.
The hope was that one of these tunnels would lead 200 men to freedom. It would become the stuff of legend.
Give up your hopeless attempts to escape. We're going to devote our energies to sports and gardening, all the cultural pursuits. Meanwhile, we dig.
This is the basis of the movie The Great Escape, starring Steve McQueen, James Garner, Charles Bronson, and other greats.
District manufacturer.
Remains on the site still hold traces of the true life escape, including the most audacious tunnel, Harry.
We are now actually in the north compound where the hut 104 was. Not much left except a few pieces of the concrete. And it was selected because it was almost in the middle of the compound. So the Germans, they didn't suspect there would be any tunneling.
Even so, the Germans still left gaps under their accommodation so tunneling could easily be spotted. But there was a solution. Inside all the huts, solid stove bases stood between 2 rooms. These plinths went down through the gap to the ground.
2 stoves were connected to the one chimney. After they removed the stove from this place, they used this area to build the entrance, and kind of fake floor was built using the same tiles here to cover the entrance of the tunnel.
Harry would be dug nearly 10 meters below Hut 104, then travel more than 90 meters under 2 barbed wire fences and exit at the tree line that bordered the camp. At under 1 meter wide, the tunnel was tiny, so 2 larger staging areas were also incorporated. These would aid the movement of escapees and house some of its technical innovations.
The diggers moved in the tunnel using a kind of underground railway. And they were able to illuminate by using lamps made with cooking fat, scavenged from the camp's own kitchens and from the prisoners' own meals. In order to ensure that people didn't asphyxiate in the tunnels, fresh air was pumped in. They used a gym bag as a set of bellows to pump fresh air into the tunnel.
Dug with only improvised tools, including cutlery, even the earth they were excavating was hostile.
One of the reasons the Germans cite the camp here is the soil is very weak, very sandy, it's prone to collapse.
So the tunnels were shored up with timber that had been looted from around the camp.
The bunks, the bedboards, the benches, the chairs, they disassemble all this stuff and they take it underground to shore up these tunnels.
And the soil at this site created a further problem.
Topsoil of the camp was actually dark, gray. Meanwhile, the dirt taken from the tunnels was extremely bright and yellow. So you can see the topsoil, which is dark, gray. But if you try to dig, you will find some yellow soil. This could be soil dug out from the escape tunnel, Harry. You feel like you're touching history.
So the inmates would conceal soil inside their baggy Second World War trousers, and they would walk out across the camp, and they would spread the soil from the tunnels so that it wouldn't be noticeable to the Germans.
It's estimated they removed about 100 tons of material with essentially sort of handmade tools.
Before long, every available area of the camp was being used to dispose of the excavated soil, even the theater.
The theater was selected by the prisoners because there was a large empty space underneath the floor of the audience, and it was a perfect place to hide tons of the soil.
Oh my God, they found Tom!
But the tunnelers' luck would soon run out. First, curious guards uncovered Tom and destroyed it with dynamite. Then, Dick was abandoned when the camp expanded and covered its exit point. Now, all hope rested on Harry, but even that wouldn't last long.
They had to escape because Germans were very close to find the tunnel. And they had to make a decision. We have to escape as soon as possible.
The airmen knew that Harry wasn't quite ready. A stone line running through the woods shows the tunnel's path.
They actually break out through Harry in March of 1944. In reality, it was the tail end of the coldest winter in European history. It was freezing cold. They get to the end of Harry, and the hatch won't open because it's just frozen shut beneath a carapace of snow. So they're sitting there. They spend an hour and a half trying to knock this thing loose.
Another problem was that the tunnel was too short.
Hold on to yourself, Bartlett. You're 20 feet short. The hole is right here in the open. The guard is between us and the lights.
So it made the escape very difficult.
By the time guards spotted the fleeing prisoners, 76 men had crawled their way to freedom. Tragically, the majority were quickly rounded up.
When Hitler heard about the Great Escape, he was absolutely furious. And Hitler wanted to kill every airman who escaped from Stalag Luft 3.
Actually, only 3 of them successfully escaped to England. 73 were captured by the Germans, and 50 of them were executed by the Gestapo.
The POW's quiet determination, spirit, and resistance was stirringly captured by Hollywood, although with a bit of artistic license.
You know, people would expect that there were a lot of Americans involved in this escape attempt because of, the role of Steve McQueen in the movie The Great Escape. But in fact, all the Americans in the camp had been moved to a different Stalag before the escape attempt. So there are actually no Americans involved in this Great Escape.